What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, June 16th, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our program today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone and put you on the air with your comments and questions. Next Tuesday, of course, on the 20th, Dr. Renee Default will be our on-air guest talking about the problems with mercury and high fructose corn syrup, and apparently a little bit of a disagreement she had over that matter with the Food and Drug Administration. Now, we are continuing to see the fallout from the tragic shooting of the GOP baseball team, and it is painting a portrait of America that, frankly, in some areas is not very flattering at all. And what is alarming is how many liberals are out there trying to fan this along, saying it's a good thing. And amazingly enough, over at the Huffington Post, writer Jesse Ben basically came on out and said it's time to organize the violent resistance following the shooting of the congressman. This is way over the top. It's incitement to violence. And again, I'm disappointed in Trump on many areas. Okay, but we're supposed to be a civil society. And obviously civility is breaking down. And with it, our civilization as a whole. Apparently, some GOP people are getting hate mail. It's just this ongoing campaign by the liberal snowflakes out there. The other day, right after the shooting, we were talking about how liberals were going on Twitter with all these hateful comments about, you know, see, you should have voted for gun control, and you should have done this, and you should have done that. And now there are people out there trying to claim that Scalise was targeted because of involvement with Pedogate, and everybody's just out there pounding this thing for their particular agenda. But even today, despite the backlash, despite the embarrassing revelation that the shooter was himself a Democrat, a Bernie Sanders supporter, they're still out there saying this was a good thing, and it's I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted by this behavior. I really, really am. Now, Nancy Pelosi, who has occasionally given us reason to think she's lost her reality license, was up there making a speech to Congress and actually said that Scalise had died. And then she realized she made a goof and hides it by fake coughing fit. And is she just really that senile, or was she having her BBC World Trade Center 7 has collapsed moment? A lot of people are very concerned that Scalise is in the exact same hospital where Seth Rich strangely died, despite very, very minor gun wounds. Now, a lot of people were asking, how did Hodgkinson know where to go for this practice? And I'd speculated that there was probably some kind of a bulletin board over the Capitol building. Turns out it wasn't that difficult. Apparently, the New York Times actually ran a story saying the GOP members of the House are going to be over at this baseball park in Alexandria with a practice session for the charity game. And so, yeah, it's amazing here. Now, in a more general sense, we've reached the point where this so-called resist movement and its associated violence are starting to tear America apart. And maybe that's their goal, or maybe they just don't care. Maybe Hillary's attitude is, if I can't be the president, there's not going to be a United States of America any longer. But they're out there, they're demonstrating, they're causing property damage. And the spearhead of that is this loosely formed, for lack of a better word, terrorist group called Antifa. Now, Antifa claims that their name is short for anti-fascist, And, of course, the irony of that is that all of their tactics are straight from the fascist playbook. And apparently somebody has found an Antifa training manual on how to go on out and harm their targets, which includes a section on how to hide sharp objects inside pet treats and scatter them in the area where their targets are going to walk the dogs to kill their pets. As Ron White would say, you have to be a real manly man to go after the puppies and kittens. Now, Oliver Stone is in the news right now a lot because of, first of all, his interviews with Vladimir Putin, and second of all, because of his little head-to-head with Stephen Colbert. And it's a shame CBS cut that out because Oliver Stone did make a very valid point. Everyone's screaming about Russia trying to influence American politics, but Israel just does it all the time. But you're not supposed to talk about that. Anyway, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And so Oliver Stone was on Tucker Carlson tonight, last night, and basically saying that the deep state and the military-industrial complex and the intelligence agencies are all trying to shape policy with leaks. And that does seem to have some merit because it is coming on out that James Comey leaked more than just that one memo to the New York Times. In fact, it may turn out he was one of the major, if not the major leaker, trying to get information into the media in order to shape policy. And certainly the goal of that leak to the New York Times by Comey was to get Attorney General Jeff Sessions to recuse himself from the Russian investigation so that they could put in this political hack, Robert Mueller, to do a hatchet job on the president. Stone went on to say that he's absolutely shocked at how the CIA is treating Trump right now. He shouldn't be too surprised because, of course, he made a very excellent movie about how the CIA was treating John F. Kennedy. But the reality is Special Prosecutor Mueller is a political hack. And again, going on back to just after 9/11, when Mueller was head of the FBI, he was part and parcel of that attempt to frame innocent people for the anthrax letters. When those anthrax letters first showed up, they were written to make it look like they were from semi-literate Muslims. But it turned out the anthrax contained in them was our own stuff from U.S. military biological weapons laboratories. And they went after Stephen Hatfield, and they made his life, they ruined his life. He sued for almost $5 million. And then they jumped to somebody else. They went to Bruce Ivins, who they just basically wrecked his life. They destroyed him. And this was all done by Mueller with James Comey as his assistant. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, there was actually a real suspect in that case, Dr. Philip Zack, who had been fired from that same laboratory where the biological weapon form of anthrax was being stored, the exact same strain, over a racially motivated attack against an Egyptian co-worker. And the security system showed Philip Zack, who apparently had not surrendered his little cards or anything, going into that lab where that anthrax was being stored. And nobody investigated him. Nobody talked to him. Oh, it was, we're going to drain this lake over here. We're sure he threw his anthrax mixing stuff in there. I mean, it was just an absolute ridiculous dog and pony show. They were trying to frame innocent people and protect somebody who very clearly indications were that he was guilty. And that's not what we're supposed to be getting from the FBI, if you believe all those wonderful TV shows and movies, which we don't. Now, attention from all this Russia investigation is now focusing on Loretta Lynch. And Donald Trump took the gloves off earlier this week and basically accused former Attorney General Loretta Lynch of illegally giving Hillary Clinton protection during the investigation into the Democrat presidential nominee's private email server. And I'm glad Trump did it. Now, going out and doing it on Twitter, it's beginning to look a little petty and vindictive. But Trump is the president, and he does have certain powers and authorities. And he's got to go on the offensive here. He's been playing defensive rope-a-dope for way too long. And the opposition is not tiring out. Even though there is no evidence of this Russia collusion, now they're trying to shift it to obstruction. They're not going to stop until he is gone. He has got to fight back. And the best way to fight back is to go right at the heart of that narcocracy. Loretta Lynch, Hillary Clinton, and even former FBI Director James Comey, who was, after all, a director at HSBC when they were caught laundering all that drug money. Trump needs to get aggressive. He's got to regain the initiative right now. The time for being polite is over. This battle is not going to be won on Twitter. It's going to be won in the courtrooms. And he's got to move forward on this. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, I don't know if I ever told you. Before I was, most of my adult life, I've been in some kind of law enforcement. I was a court officer in New York, of course, and a correctional officer in Texas. And when I was a court officer, that's kind of similar to the Capitol Police. When you had a bunch of judges get together or something like that, they would have a number of us there for protection. We didn't have, they didn't have personal protection all the time unless they were threatened. And they had what you call the judicial escort team. But other than that, if there was like a bunch of them got together, they'd have a bunch of us there for protection.
Well, there were Capitol Police at that baseball diamond.
Only two, and that's for one guy. That was the Scalise, because he was a special. He was not just a congressman. He was like a majority whip or something like that.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, these geniuses who, with their huge security state and surveillance state, and what you got to go through when you go through the airport and all this other crap, they should have known. There should be some kind of, when you got this many congressmen and senators getting together in one place, there should be at least 10 officers to watch them. And they should even have, other than just pistols, they should have like shotguns or semi-automatic rifles or something like that. Because you never know.
I agree.
Especially, they always think.
I absolutely agree with you. They were left unprotected. And again, I think the New York Times showed a serious lack of judgment in running the story, saying where they were going to be. And again, getting on back to this total surveillance state we're all supposed to be living in, looking at Hodgkinson's Facebook page, it was obvious this guy had some serious issues. If anybody was going to be on a watch list, it should have been this guy. But he wasn't. And to me, it suggests that all of this total information awareness and NSA scanning and everything, like anything else produced by the United States government, it's a huge waste of time and money and doesn't actually work.
It's only meant to harass us and to watch us. It's not meant for anything else. This guy, by the way, the fact that, I'm beginning to believe now, this wasn't a false flag, but this was an assassination attempt, and I'm beginning to believe somebody on the left was behind this, very possibly the DNC, the same people that murdered
No. Look at what has happened here. This has been a PR disaster for the liberals and the Democrats. And what's amazing is they don't seem to realize it. And they're still out there on Twitter making all these hateful comments. If whoever's supposed to be advising them on public relations ought to tell them, you got to cool it right now. This is a PR disaster for the Democrats. And so, no, I don't think anybody on the left was behind this. I think the guy really was a lone wolf.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, here he goes. He moves from Belleville, Illinois. I'm not sure where Belleville is, but I'm sure the cost of living is a lot lower than it is in Washington, D.C. And out of nowhere, the guy decides to move to Washington and lives out of his van.
Yeah.
It just seems very odd to me. It just seems like, this was kind of planned. It's like these people are not very smart. Like if it was the DNC behind it, instead of hiring a professional, they hired an idiot who didn't even know how to shoot right.
No.
And actually, the reason they finally were able to gun him down is because he actually, while he was reloading, he gets up while he's reloading and starts walking around. And that was it for him. A professional would have probably killed the 2 cops first, and then had a field day killing these senators and congressmen.
I agree with you, which is again why I don't think this guy was hired to do this, because he was so bad at it. But let me finish here for a second. First of all, apparently when he moved to Washington in March, he told his I guess they were in the middle of a divorce, his wife, that he was going to go to Washington, D.C. to work on tax reform. And again, this is consistent with some photos that have surfaced of him where, you know, he's talking about how you need to tax the rich and not the poor and the rest of that. But again, this is a disaster for the Democrats and the liberals. In fact, I got an email from somebody saying that Donald Trump did this just to make the Democrats look bad, which I think is an equally silly idea. But again, the fact that this guy was so inept, and all those people who survived the shooting there ought to be grateful for it. The fact that he was so inept, it doesn't look like a put-up job. You want somebody who's going to be able to go in there and hit the designated target. And it looked like this guy was just firing into the crowd. And what's interesting is apparently before he left for Washington, D.C., there have been noise complaints by his neighbors because he was out back target shooting and practicing with that SKS.
But what I wanted to point out is that the murder of Seth Rich does not sound to me like it was a professional job. It just seems like it was covered up. Because first of all, he survived. They didn't evidently use a very high-powered weapon. There might have even been some kind of a struggle. He actually, from what I understand, he should have survived when he got to the hospital. And it sounds to me like if anybody killed him, it might have been the Washington, D.C. police, because everything was closed up when they got there. So, and everything was covered up. But it was not it doesn't sound to me like it was a professional job in the first place. And the DNC, I'm sure, put whoever did it up there. And now I've seen Anonymous on YouTube, and Anonymous is saying that there were 3 individuals that were caught after this. 3 young, sounds like fairly young kids.
What do you mean by after this? What do you mean by after this?
No, after the shooting.
Which one? You're blending 2 shootings together.
I'm sorry, the Seth Rich.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you.
Okay. There were three people caught, and then they were let go. Then for some reason, they just disappeared from federal records. They were caught, they said, by federal police, I assume the FBI. Okay? And then their records just disappeared. This comes from Anonymous.
Let me have a few moments here. Remember the Columbine shooting, and they arrested arrested 3 other people besides the 2 kids who supposedly committed suicide in the school. You know, they do sometimes these hits get done very, very badly. I can think of no better example than the fact that when they suicided Vince Foster, he had 2 bullet wounds on him, that they had to cover up one of those, and they didn't even do that very well. The fact is that these people who work for the Clintons, they're not always very, very good. But again, to me, it's obvious Seth Rich was a hit, an assassination for being the DNC leaker. But this situation with James, James Hodgkinson, my instincts are saying he really was a lone wolf. The guy had issues, and you're talking about him standing up while he's reloading is another reason why I want to know if this guy was on prescription antidepressants.
Oh, that's certainly possible. I mean, I'm not saying I think this for sure. It's just, at first, when this happened, I said, yeah, this sounds like just some nutcase. But then when I started looking at the fact that he, moves from Illinois to Washington, lives out of his car, did have some experience shooting guns, evidently he had this weapon before, then I started thinking of Seth Rich, and I said, you know what? Whoever hires these guys, they don't hire the best. They don't hire a real professional hitman. And I started thinking of the Seth Rich case, the fact that he actually survived the shooting and they killed him in the hospital.
Okay,
so
Mark.
That's why I'm saying.
Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, when somebody is hired to do a shooting, their ultimate goal is to get away with it and escape, like those 3 gentlemen who vanished after the Seth Rich hit. This guy apparently didn't seem to care if he was going to live or die. And that's another reason why. Was he on medication? Was he suicidal? Anyway, Mark, got to let you go for a commercial. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call. Alex in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike, happy weekend for everybody that's listening. I wanted to say that because you just, I'm an experienced person that went through the war, very young, but I went through the Salvadoran Civil War, and all the writing's on the wall, Mike. It's right there. I mean, it's sad because we were all, helping you work so that this doesn't happen. We could avoid World War III, but I think if we can avoid World War III, the war is going to come here, and unfortunately, the situation and tensions are so exacerbated, and people are just full of intransigence, both on the left and the right. The left is very vengeful, and the right is very upset that they've had to be putting up with all this nonsense and outright shenanigans, and they just don't have any more patience for it. I mean, there was an article I read a long time ago that said that deplorables had the longest fuse, but it is, however, a fuse. And some of these guys, they're just itching to do things that will end certain things, that will bring forward some other things that we just don't want them. And we especially someone that's lived through it and has seen it. I mean, the only thing that hasn't happened yet is our currency hasn't been devalued. But as soon as that, I mean, that's around the corner.
Well, our currency has been in a gradual state of devaluation for going on the last 100 years.
Yeah, but the bubbles are keeping it up.
Yeah, but it looks like all the bubbles are bubbling at the same time, and when they pop, there's going to be a major upset. Obviously, I understand what you're saying, and sadly, I agree with pretty much all of it. I certainly do not want to see violence in the streets of America. I do not want to see a civil war. I do not want to see a national emergency and martial law. And unfortunately, especially over on the liberal side, these people are caught up in their dream world of how they think the country ought to be. They're not thinking long term what the consequences of their actions could lead to. And it's certainly not the world that they imagine they want to live in. But right now they're caught up in the moment. They're encouraged to think only in the immediate here and now. In fact, as the society as a whole is all about 30 and 60-second sound bites. And most people don't really look at what they're doing and say, how's this going to affect things 5 years down the road? And that has been a real problem with our U.S. government as well, that goes on out and does these things like the oil price war against Russia, and they didn't consider how it might backfire. They went into Afghanistan and apparently didn't consider that we might still be there 15 years later.
Mike, there's one big difference that I find with the folks that are awake and the folks that are fighting being awake, and that's just fear. It's just fear. You either love your brother that you've been here in this country fighting and struggling with the narcocracies, or you want to kill them. And unfortunately, there's these people are just so engulfed in fear because of the system that once held this country together is no more. But it's like these people don't want to accept that it hasn't been. Like you have some of these like workhorse patriots that they pretend that all we have to do is follow the Constitution. They have no idea that the Constitution has been usurped with technology.
Well, no, first of all, I have to cut you off because we're at a commercial break here. No, the problem is there are people who think the Constitution should be the guideline for the country, but too much of the country, including the government itself, doesn't agree. They want to turn this nation into something else, a liberal paradise, or the reality is a fascist dictatorship. Alex, we got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and backing up to the shooting because people are still talking about it here. Somebody's actually put together a map using the fusion function in Google Maps, and there's a link to it now on the main page of whatreallyhappened.com. And it shows reported instances of violence against Trump supporters. And it's all over the country, mostly along the coastlines. We've even had an incident out here where a Trump supporter's home was vandalized. Minor, but still it shows what's going on. What is really troubling, though, apparently a Democratic strategist, James Devine, is out there tweeting under the hashtag Hunt Republican Congressman. And his tweet is, "We are in a war with selfish, foolish, and narcissistic rich people. Why is it a shock when things turn violent?" Well, Mr. Devine, I would like to remind you that when it comes to narcissistic rich people, most of those are in the film industry, and they overwhelmingly are Democrats. And I would like to remind Mr. Devine and everybody else that there are a lot of Republicans in this country who are not rich, who are not narcissistic. And if you look at some of those crybaby snowflake liberals who were just unable to control their tears when Hillary lost, do you really think you stand a chance at winning an actual civil war when it comes down to it? I think it would be very, very stupid for you to try. All right, a couple of news stories, then we're going to go back to the phones here. We were talking about how this Russia probe has exposed Loretta Lynch for possible wrongdoing in the Clinton email case. I mean, there's a much stronger case against Loretta Lynch for obstruction than there is against Donald Trump. In fact, there doesn't really seem to be a case for obstruction against Donald Trump. You can't get an obstruction charge out of the FBI director saying, well, I felt uncomfortable. Because remember, Comey testified under oath. He was never told to alter any of the investigations. It would take an overt act like that to constitute obstruction of justice. Another article that's coming out of the Daily News is saying Loretta Lynch should be called to testify about her direction to then FBI Director James Comey to refer to the email case as a matter and to avoid using the word investigation. Now, Mike Pence has hired his own outside attorney for this coming Russia probe. And now Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is acknowledging that he may recuse himself from the Russia probe because he's probably going to be called as a witness as well. But it's not a Russia probe anymore. They're shifting it over to obstruction. And Trump is understandably upset. He's being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told him to fire the FBI director. And here's where it gets interesting. Mueller's on a fishing expedition. We can't get anything with Russia. Let's go for obstruction. There's a small problem. The statute that allows the appointment of a special counsel says you have to have a specific articulation of a crime. You can't just have a special counsel and say, go find something. There's a special counsel to investigate the White House tapes, to go back to Nixon. A special counsel to investigate the Russia collusion thing. And he's supposed to stay with that. He's not allowed to just say, I'm expanding the probe to find out if Donald Trump is gay and sexually harassing the FBI director. It's ridiculous. But it's actually illegal for Mueller to go outside the original specific articulation of a crime. All right, let's take some phone calls. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, you're on fire today. What a great show.
Thank you.
I think that we're basically at a point that the caller from Central America was just on point for the most part. And I think where we're at is Americans that have been here, the second generation, et cetera, we're really not needed. We're kind of the middle class that knows or expects certain rights. And it's better to just get rid of us and bring in a new breed of folks that will accept less and to pit all these different groups against each other. Don't bring people in that have patriotic leanings. Bring people in that are just here to make a buck and send money home, etc. And an example of that is Obama, a nation, was not allowing Christians in from Syria. That is proof positive. They don't want Christians. A second evidence is Cubans tend to vote Republican, and now they are not welcome here.
Yes.
So the divide and conquer strategy is well on its way, and the sad part is these folks that are the useful idiots that won't even take a step back and try to see how they're being used and manipulated. And that's my big struggle, is trying to reach these folks. I don't know if it's the water or the flicker rates again, but we got to reach out to these folks that are at least on the fence and try to reach them. And Trump needs to activate maybe the Oath Keepers or the National Guard to show that we do have laws and order here, because things are getting out of hand. And this is really our ninth inning or fourth quarter. I mean, we have to start mobilizing and stop this ridiculous psyop on Trump. What are your thoughts?
Well, one thing that is very troubling to me is we're seeing all of these politicians and various groups openly violating existing U.S. law, and I'm wondering, why aren't they being prosecuted? Why are not the governors of these states that are defying federal immigration law and providing sanctuary to these illegal immigrants, why are they not being arrested and charged? It almost seems like this idea of a two-tier society where the laws only apply to us poor people down here, and once you're a mayor or a governor or whatever, that you can just do whatever you want. We were talking earlier about this writer over at the Huffington Post who's saying it's time to organize the violence against conservatives. That's incitement to violence. That's a crime. And it just seems, that's why I'm saying Trump needs to go on the offensive. He needs to regain the initiative. It's time for him to get aggressive. He just can't stand there and be a punching bag for these people like he has been up until now. He's got to turn the tables on him. He's got to go after Loretta Lynch. He's got to go after Hillary Clinton, and for no other reason than it would underscore the fact that there has been a double standard where these people were allowed to get away with serious felony crimes while the entire media establishment is out there trying to just make up stuff about Donald Trump and prostitutes in Mexico, the Russia collusion that went nowhere, the Russia hacking the DNC email server. It's time for Trump to actually take off the gloves and maybe put on some presidential brass knuckles. Boy, there's a product idea.
Yeah. I think it's the Oath Keepers, the National Guard. We need to be on alert. We need to be ready to act to suppress any kind of mob rule. And that's where we're heading. And we know that's what they want. They want society. The social contract's been broken, and everyone wants their slice of the pie. It's like they're gonna be promised, go take that mansion off the hill. If you can get it, it's going to be yours. I mean, I just see things spinning out of control, and it's going to, once it happens, it's going to be exponentially. One thing I want to mention, they're trying to compile a list. Cernovich is suggesting we get all the tweets that are kill Trump and act on that legally.
I agree.
Cannot call for the assassination of the president and get away with it. That's a really good starting point to push back. And once again, legal, lawful, rule, we can't let this thing spin out of control. And that's what they're trying to do. I can see it.
Well,
thanks, Mike.
I think a big part of thank you for the phone call. I think a big part of the problem is that for too long, these people who are out there screaming, kill or hunt Republican congressmen and all the rest of it, nothing has happened to them. And it's like having a spoiled child. They do something bad, you just laugh it off. They're going to do something bad again, and it's going to get worse and worse over time. And unfortunately, the liberal snowflakes they're acting like a bunch of really spoiled children, and now they're getting into this Antifa situation where they're out there committing violent acts, and so far nobody seems to want to like slap them down and say it's time to grow up and be adults, you know, and be citizens of the United States of America. And there are certain expected standards of behavior that go with that, you know, which is that you're not out there threatening politicians you don't agree with. You engage them in debate, and you certainly don't go on out and just haul off and start shooting them. That's not the United States of America that was intended to be. And I understand that a lot of what the United States was intended to be has already been taken away from us by the corruption in the central government and the machinations of the CIA and so forth. But I am not ready to say that I'm supporting any kind of a violent resolution. I'm still convinced that we're headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse, and we all need to stay calm and sit back and just let it happen. And one of the aspects of that is going to be that those of us who work for a living and are self-sufficient and taking care of ourselves are going to get through this transition. And all of those liberals out there who are expecting the government to buy them everything, they're going to be in serious, serious trouble. All right, let's take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Yeah, your last caller is absolutely right. Typical divide and conquer. Been seen through history before, and they use the media as the linchpin to start people. You know, that guy was just a nut, but they use the media and they get people riled up. And there's always going to be a percentage of people that they'll use as their foot soldiers, you know, to go out and do harm. And I have to definitely second the motion again. We're headed towards something because this can't continue. I mean, the rhetoric is still coming out. You know, it's only been a day, and there's like just. It's going to be back to business as normal, you know, like just the rhetoric, the garbage. It's the globalist deep state versus Trump and his supporters, and and it seems like they just want to dispose of us if we get in their way now. That's what it's coming down to.
It is a very ugly situation, and one of the earlier callers did make a valid point that there may be an agenda to sort of dispose of American citizens who have come to expect a certain standard of living by living and working in the United States, and just blanket replace them with a new labor force that will be happier with much less. And it sounds
like in Europe.
Yeah, like they're doing it in Europe as well.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I just want to mention, you'll probably talk about this, the possible killing of al-Baghdadi, which we heard this before, but 30 commanders and 300 ISIS fighters from Saudi Arabia and the U.S. have been killed by the Russians in May. I just want to let people know that.
Well,
thanks, Mike.
Okay, apparently the U.S. is now confirming that Russia did get al-Baghdadi. So, you know, he was one of the two big boogeymen used to sell us on the necessity for war. So, my oh my, what is the United States government going to do now? They're going to have to invent a whole new supervillain, you know, for us to all hate and fear, and so forth and so on. It's one of the things I liked about the third Iron Man movie, where Ben Kingsley played this drug addict actor who was playing this horrible terrorist. And then when Iron Man finally meets him, he says, you know, it's complicated. It's complicated. Yeah, I'm just an actor, really. And again, going on back to one of my favorite TV series, Max Headroom, where there was a campaign of terror and it was all over the media and buildings are being blown up and everything. And they finally find the terrorists and they're inside a special effects stage. And all the videos of the bombings and everything were of miniatures. And they said, why are you doing this? And the guy said, well, it's just easier and cheaper to do it in miniatures than actually go out and blow up the real buildings. But as long as the people believed it, they even used that theme in Die Hard, Live Free, I think, Bruce Willis, one of the Die Hard ones about the computer hacking and everything. All right, John on the West Coast, what is on your mind?
We lost him.
Oh, well, gosh darn, he was just there a minute ago. Going to have to start microchipping our callers so we don't lose them. All righty, getting on back to Hillary's emails. More and more information is coming on out. As you know, Judicial Watch keeps finding more emails that should have been turned over by Hillary Clinton and were not. She lied, she lied, she lied, she lied under oath. Why is nothing being done about that? And one of the emails does confirm something that we have been saying all along. The reason Muammar Gaddafi was killed was to stop the Libyan gold dinar and to gain control over the Libyan oil reserves, in particular what currency they would be traded for. That's what this is really all about. All of this war and bloodshed and risk to the planet itself, a nuclear extinction level event, is an argument over whose brand of ink and paper we will all be enslaved to for the next 100 years. Now, there's a very enlightening article over here in Washington's blog about why the Washington Post is so positive over the U.S. intelligence agencies. The Washington Post never says anything bad about them anymore. Far cry from the days of the Watergate investigation. And, of course, the reason is because Jeff Bezos, who runs Amazon, bought the Washington Post and is molding the Post's editorial policy. And Amazon, in turn, has been working with the CIA since 2014 to provide the agency's cloud computing needs and apparently is now expanding to other American intelligence agencies. So, yeah, the Washington Post is absolutely useless in finding out what the government is really about. Because its owner, Jeff Bezos, is all buddy-buddy with the intelligence agencies. You're never going to get the truth out of them. By the way, another revelation here, that the New York Times and the Washington Post have been busted buying clicks from China. Their China traffic jumped from 5.1 to 49.2% of all site traffic in just 2 months period, trying to boost the illusion of a readership. And by the way, by doing so, they're defrauding their advertisers. Just something to keep in mind. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call. Then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got some news to get through. Bob in Princeton, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to put the things in historical terms. Can you kind of talk about the abuse that Donald Trump is getting in relationship to the abuse that Jimmy Carter got and the flack that way back when Richard Nixon got, when it was 24/7 attacking him? And even though there's the Watergate situation we can talk about, there was a hatred for him being a part of the House Un-American Affairs activities, and I guess the left never forgave him for that, even though some of the things he did were more progressive than any other Democrats that came along. So could you kind of talk about those two other presidents and how the current attack on Mr. Trump kind of exposes the deep state in all three of those occasions?
Well, I would agree in terms of the deep state for Donald Trump and Jimmy Carter. The difference with Richard Nixon is that he was an experienced politician. And he knew what he was getting into the White House. The common thread between Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump is they were truly outsiders. And they came on into Washington, D.C. politics with a lot of false assumptions and unrealistic expectations, and they got blindsided by it. As far as Richard Nixon, there were a lot of people. I mean, anytime you have a president coming into the Washington, D.C. environment, there's going to be opposition, especially from the opposition party. So there's always that to some kind of a degree. The opposition to Richard Nixon was that he did have a reputation for corruption, not on the scale of the Clintons, obviously. If you're my age, you remember the Checkers speech and so forth. And there was just that, a lot of people just didn't like him on a gut level. And I didn't either. I actually met him when I was a kid because I was living with my grandparents in East Concord, New Hampshire. And my grandfather was very big in New Hampshire GOP politics. And Nixon had just lost to Kennedy. And he was up there working with New Hampshire's Senator Styles Bridges, who was going to run for Congress. And after he was done with Bridges, Nixon would come on over to my grandparents' house, and my grandmother and mother would immediately leave for the bingo parlor because they knew what was going to happen. Walt and Dick were going to get blasted on wild turkey and spend the night bitching about them damn Kennedy boys. But I remember, as young as I was, I just had an instant dislike for the guy. But you're absolutely right. Nixon's role on the House Un-American Committee, the whole McCarthy situation, left a very bitter taste, not just with the left, but with everybody who understood that it had been a totally unjustified destruction of innocent people's lives. And they weren't sure they wanted that kind of a personality willing to do something like that in the White House. But again, following Watergate, there were researchers who went on back and found indications that Richard Nixon had been cheating during his first election. So, again, Nixon deserved a lot of what he got. Jimmy Carter did not. Trump does not. And Trump is, like I said, he's got to take off the gloves and put on the presidential brass knuckles. Thanks for the call, Bob. We've got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back.